Welcome to this week's installment of Constant Procession. This fall, I'll be taking you on a journey into my ongoing self-publishing activities. Later in this episode, I'll follow up with things I learned while narrating last summer's podcasts of my first book, The Constant Procession. Hang on, this promises to be a journey into the unknown. One of the joys of a road trip is getting lost in an audiobook reading of a favorite novel or biography. Somehow the drive time evaporates the deeper you get in the story as you travel. And I must say, for me, somehow the world, as it passes by the car window, somehow has a richer vibe. How many of you are audiobook listeners? What are your favorite audiobooks? What are you listening to these days? Let me know in the comments section of this episode's podcast page at nicosteves.com. And the audiobook version of The Very Fine Light is ready for those road trips. Just go to Amazon, Audible, or Apple Books to find it. By the way, just to remind you, The Very Fine Light is a contemporary novel with Christian themes about a village on the verge of bankruptcy, the mayor with a secret, and Randy, a fun-loving co-worker who's always in trouble for telling it like it is. Now for the reflections from last summer's podcasts of my earlier book. Enjoy! And so last time completes the reading cycle of my book, The Constant Procession. For this installment, I'd like to add some observations. As I traveled in this world from Mexico City to Paris, I have found in those places where documented appearances of the Virgin Mary have occurred special feelings of inspiration. Places in time that share a sensation of faith and hope. Admittedly, if one simply goes to any of these locations without some sort of personal reflection beforehand, they may be totally turned off by it all. But to my way of thinking, perhaps this is the point of it all. The unexamined life is not worth living. It's the quote from Socrates at his trial that comes to mind. And for me, it is a large part of the point to this journey of mine as I stumbled upon this constant procession of people who look to the Virgin Mary to intercede on their behalf to her Son, to help to guide them on life's journey. God so loved the world that He gave His only Son to us, and did so through a young woman who had great faith and belief in God. And her Son welcomes her intercessions to those of us in the world, and He will answer the prayers of those who she brings to Him. Moreover, I have seen at the various apparition sites on 3 of the 7 continents, when she comes, the Madonna inspires people from each different epoch through seers from those times. My experiences have given me a sense of how important her intercessions are for humanity over time. And herein lays the great piece of what I uncovered, that every period of time has its own ways, its own understanding of how to interpret the moral imperatives we have shared with those who came before us and with those who will follow us. And as humanity becomes more learned and inventions allow us easier ways to provide basic necessities for good living, so too the accurate communication of Christian values and beliefs need to be shared and spread. Apparitions have, over the timeline of history since the Virgin Mary passed on from the world, provided humanity a recognition that something greater than the world of man is there. And the constant procession continues. And so here are a few takeaways from what I learned from my experiences producing this podcast during this total process after reading the book. Here they are in no particular order. Technology both helped and hindered with the project. Typically, once I finished recording and editing all the voice tracks together, I would play back and do a quality check. But on occasion, things got out in the world, and I learned in a panic how to adjust those. Other times, the companies who provided the cloud services that I required to produce the podcast and keep it going had challenges of their own, and they would impact both the podcasts and our website. Oddly enough, there were even a few times when I couldn't fetched the podcast up at the very church social halls where the genesis for the book first began. People would ask me about what was going on with the podcast, and I said, well, look at this episode here, and couldn't play them back. Yet all in all, there was no more invigorating a feeling than having the podcasts produced and listening to them on the internet wherever in the world I found myself, though I didn't travel extensively over the year. And this surprised me. During the podcast production process, there were times over the year when, the concerns about the earth-shattering news of the day seemed to me, as I was working on the podcast, to be addressed by words the Madonna spoke to the seers from an apparition of times past. Frequently, it was very comforting and very encouraging to hear those words in reflection from those times to the events of modern day. The Madonna has helped me to understand and recognize the importance faith and prayer has in my life. Just as those faithful people who I first saw in the church when I was videotaping the statues of the Virgin Mary way back when, that's what I was sensing as they were humbling themselves in prayer in either thanking her or requesting the Madonna to intercede for them to her son Jesus. And I think that first got my curiosity going on learning more about apparitions of the Virgin Mary. And as I stated back in the beginning of the early podcasts, I'm not a scientist and I'm not a theologian. I'm a layperson who grew up at the end of the last century and into adulthood in this current century. People have asked me, why write about the Virgin Mary? Well, in this effort, my quest has been to learn more about the sources of strength, resolve, and comfort that people find when looking to the Madonna. In my initial inquiry, little did I realize the depth and width of my journey, and little did I know how much comfort and joy I would receive in the process. And so until next time, the Constant Procession continues. This is Nico Steves. I hope you enjoyed this installment. My book, The Very Fine Light, can be found using the title, The Very Fine Light, on Amazon.com. Please feel free to contact me at nicosteves.com. That's Nikos Steves, Steves.com. If you like this episode, and for more, share them with friends. This is Nico Steves. Thank you. See you next time.